Welcome back to a repeat guest, good friend, client of mine, Alex Long is back on the podcast. And last time, I'll link her episode below, she highlighted her expertise in the nutrition and body image and relationship with self and body. She is a master in that and has helped so many women across the globe. Today, we're going to take a more personal, vulnerable, intimate look into her life and journey as a client of mine. And I've had the honor of getting to know her from the very jump. She was an ideal client. She was showing up for calls, she was allowing herself to be seen, even if it was scary. She went at her own pace, making herself and her heart and her struggles even visible right out the gate. And so I knew right away, oh, this girl is going to get so much out of this journey. And I didn't expect to get so much in return. She became a fast friend, so easy to go deep with. She's an Enneagram type 4, so if you know what that means, she's not boring, black and white. Like you can talk about the many layers and depths and complexities of life with her. So it's going to be a fun episode. And Alex, welcome. How you doing?
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Becky. I am doing so well. It is really an honor to be a repeat guest on your show, and I'm super excited to give the listeners a little bit more insight into my personal life, right? Episode one was professional, and this is going to be a fun story.
Yeah, we've made it to the second date now. Listeners are going deeper with you, so this is gonna be good. Okay, friend, take us back to the moment when you realized your marriage was not working. Was it a single moment? Was it this slow unraveling? I know you came into the Root to Rise program because it was a question of should I stay? Should I go? You had tried a lot to make it work. So bring us back to that moment or unraveling journey for you.
Yeah, so for context, my ex, can I say his name? Am I allowed to say his name?
I would just say X. Good question. Yeah.
Okay, we can cut that out.
Yeah.
Um, Great question. So, my ex and I were together for a total of 6 years, married for four. And our issues really, honestly, they did start, unfortunately, in that first year of marriage, which I hear is pretty common for a lot of women. But he was in the military. So, we were together for 2 years. We had about a year apart while he was in basic training, and I was finishing up graduate school. And then he got stationed out in Colorado after I finished school. We got legally married. It was during COVID. So we were like, let's just make it legal, have the ceremony later. I move out to Colorado with him, and everything was really good for a while. But within that first year, I did notice us starting to grow apart a little bit. I was really thriving in my new city. I love hiking. I love snowboarding. I started doing a lot of work on myself, diving deeper into personal development. I was finally done school. I was finally learning who I really was outside of my career. And I think that looking back, I recognize that I wasn't prioritizing our marriage and our relationship. I was more so prioritizing the rest of my life and my own personal journey and making all of these new friends. But we hit a breaking point that same year. It was after our best friends got pregnant. And I was very clear when him and I first started dating that I never wanted children. And he was okay with that for as far as I knew. But then once we saw our best friends get pregnant, he came to me and said, Alex, you know what? I've realized that I actually really want children. I really want kids. And that was like a knife to the heart for me because I was like, this was a non-negotiable. We had already talked about this. Why did we get married if we were, not on the same page about this very, very big decision? And at that point, just recognizing that we had grown so far apart in our relationship prior to this conversation, it forced me to do some self-reflection. Do I actually want to stay with this person? Do I want to work on the marriage? Do I want to have kids with him? Can I see that future? Why don't I want kids? Why did I make that decision for myself? Right? I did a lot of deep work and I told him, okay, I'm open to the idea. However, I think that we need to work on our relationship before that conversation can come back to the table, if that makes sense. But that was a really emotional experience for us. We had actually almost called it quits at that point because we were like, if we're not on the same page about this, we might as well just end it now. Right? Not even, we didn't even have our wedding ceremony yet. This was very, very early on in our legal marriage. But that was the point where he and I decided, okay, let's go to couples therapy. Let's work on ourselves. Let's work on each other. Let's reconnect. Let's try to grow together in this new city. And then let's see if we can grow into people who would be good parents. Right. And that was a, almost 2 years prior to joining Root to Rise. I would say it was about a year and a half prior to finding you. And at that point, we had really tried everything. I mean, we went to couples therapy for like 8 months. I saw improvement in the way that him and I were connecting with one another. We were going on more dates. I feel like we were communicating better. We were learning more about each other, but then we stopped going to couples therapy because our counselor stopped taking on clients. And then we were traveling for the holidays and just, a bunch of stuff was going on. But then as we got deeper and deeper into our marriage, even despite the couples therapy, even despite trying to make more of an effort to connect with one another, I continued feeling really unfulfilled, really unsatisfied. Like something was just missing in this relationship. I felt like I wanted more and that I deserved more, but I didn't know how to articulate that to him. And we kept fighting all the time, like about stupid things. And I kept bringing up, like, hey, we talked about this in therapy. And, we learned that even though we're fighting about the dishes right now, it's not actually the dishes that we're fighting about. There's something underneath here. Why don't we sit down and why don't we talk about it? Why don't we dig deep? Why don't we like really unpack this together?
It's always the dishes and it's never the dishes. I'll
It's
just say
all, no,
that.
every time. And I didn't know what to do because I felt like I kept hitting a wall. I kept hitting a wall, and I would see these glimpses of him letting his walls down, if you will, and starting to get a little bit vulnerable. And we would make a little bit of progress, and I would feel a little seen, a little heard. But then it would be right back to the way things were before. I felt really confused, really conflicted. I was like, this person is not the person that I fell in love with. I felt really gaslit sometimes, and I didn't know that it was gaslighting at that time. And I kept expressing this to him. And I'm like, I recognize that I am not being my best self around you. I started getting aggressive. I started getting defensive. I started saying things to him that I didn't mean. And so it was just this like toxic cycle back and forth one another. And I was at a loss. At that point, even too, before I joined Root to Rise, we had decided to read this marriage book together. I don't know if you or your listeners have ever heard of it, The Seven Principles of Making Marriage Work, because we had tried couples therapy. We stopped couples therapy. I was still feeling unhappy. We were still fighting all the time, not getting to the root of the problem. And then I was like, what about this book? Why don't we try reading this book together? And we tried reading that book together. It lasted about 3 chapters, and then I kept hitting the same wall. And I just didn't know what to do. And then I found you.
And then enter.
Then enter
Both of our
somatic
lives
work.
changed forever. So thank you for sharing that background. And I'm excited to get, into the next parts of the journey. I'm curious, Alex, in retrospect now, because you have divorced, we'll get to that. But what would you say, or would you say in retrospect that you stayed past your expiration date, or do you see this all as divine timing or a little bit of both?
No, honestly, I saw it through to the end. I knew in my heart because in the midst of all of this, right? We're trying all the tools, we're trying all the therapies, all the modalities, we're having all the hard conversations. I'm working on myself. I'm trying to address my own toxic traits, right, with my own cognitive behavioral therapy that I was doing, right? We were also getting ready to move across the country because at this point, he was getting restationed from Colorado to DC. And at that point, I actually at one point looked him in the eyes and I told him that if we weren't married, I would have left already. I was so unhappy, so unfulfilled, and just felt like I was not making progress with him at all. And I genuinely didn't know what else to do. But because of what we're told around marriage and commitment, and because, of course, I fell in love with this person, I wanted to make it work. I really wanted to give it my all. And something in me, I can't explain it, but something in me was like, you're going to move to DC. You're going to give this one last shot. There's still something for you here. You don't know what it is. All of my friends just who saw me, they saw me without him, they saw me with him, and they were really concerned at that point because they were like, Alex, we can tell that you're not happy. We can tell that you are not yourself when you're with him, but when you're out without him, you are brighter, you are happier, you are more energetic. Like, you don't have to go if you don't want to. And I kept saying, I was like, I do. Something in me is saying, I do. I don't know why, but I have to try. And I told myself that I wasn't going to leave. I wasn't going to make that decision, that life altering decision, without giving it everything I had, without learning all that I'm supposed to learn. So I truly don't regret a single thing. I think I really, really learned a lot from that whole experience of doing the work with him and having these hard conversations with him, and just even looking back, learning the signs and signals of my body that were telling me one thing or another. And I'm glad that I moved to DC, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have met you.
Yeah, that's the wild thing. So you signed up for the program and then you moved like 30 minutes away from me and
It
we got
was nuts.
person, like total divine appointment. And I know now you've moved back to Colorado and we're still very much in touch, which makes me happy. But that's what I want to get into next. So, how did your nervous system react when you even thought about the idea of leaving? I know that may be different than some of our listeners when we even talk attachment styles. Uh,
Yeah.
how would you describe yourself attachment style wise? And then how did your nervous system react at that thought?
Yeah. So this is kind of the weird thing, right? Because when I first met you, I remember going out to dinner at Lazy Dog, and you and Julie were asking me, like, have you made a decision yet? How are you feeling? Like, are you going to stay? Are you going to go? And I was like, I don't know. I'm here. I'm going to try to make this our fresh start. I really think that this could be good for us. It's just him and I against the world. And like, we're having all of these issues, but who knows? Who knows what could happen in the next few months, right? But then I remember on one of our first calls together, you had asked me that question. And I define myself as, I shouldn't say I define myself as an avoidant attachment. I have avoidant behaviors,
There
but
you go.
an avoidant attachment style. And I actually told Nelson this at one point too. Even back before we moved, back before I met you, when we were still in couples therapy, I told him, I was like, leaving is the easy option for me. Even at that point, I wasn't at my red line when I told him that, but I knew that it was going to be easier for me to shut down my nervous system and go into full on hyper independent, I don't need you anyway kind of mode, and just shut him out, block him, move, and just be done with that part of my life. Even though that would be heartbreaking, and of course I didn't want that, it was going to be easier than staying and fighting and doing the work and addressing these issues and addressing my own toxic traits, right? And so when we did our first guided somatic session, you had asked me that question, and I felt lighter. I visualized myself leaving and removing myself from the situation, getting divorced. I felt relaxed. I felt lighter. And I remember, I think you asked me what does it feel like in your body if you choose to stay? I felt tense. I felt scared. And my body like just kind of recoiled a little bit. It was really subtle, but it was noticeable when I like dropped into that meditation. And that also made me sad, right? Because I was like, what is happening? I was really confused and conflicted because I had wanted to make it work. I'd wanted to do the hard work with him. That was something that I told him in my wedding vows. I was like, I want to do the hard shit with you. I really want to do the hard shit with you. And I saw so much potential in our relationship if we both just broke ourselves down. We had the potential to build something back up into a really, really beautiful marriage, have a beautiful family that we've always wanted, and break all these generational cycles. Like, I saw the vision with him. I really did. And so when I felt that in my body, this like release and relief and relaxation and freedom and lightness, I got really, really sad at first. And it honestly made the decision harder, at least at first.
Absolutely, yeah. And I want to put out there, I love the contrast of our experiences with this because you did have that sensation of it would feel easier and safer in the sense of comfort zone to just cut everything off, go independent. And I remember wishing that I could feel that. So it's
Mm,
just, you know, different nervous systems, different triggers to the same kind of quote unquote situation. When me and Sebastian were really going through it, the thought of leaving just felt like 100% death everywhere I
mm,
turned. And I couldn't imagine a scenario where it felt safe until I did somatic work, got to the other side, and for the first time ever felt in my body, in my felt sense experience, that even if that happened, I'd be okay. So I love you walking us through the process, and it's going to be different for everyone. And I will say it's powerful when you do the kind of work that you dove into, Alex, where you learn the language of your own body and you learn the difference between what ego and intuition feels like in your body. And you were able to imagine two scenarios, and one did feel lighter and more expansive and like a sigh, even if there was grief with it. It was this resonance and this settled feeling, what I remember witnessing from you and what I hear you saying now, even if the truth was, oh gosh, this isn't what I originally wanted or intended.
yeah. And one thing that I really struggled with because I knew myself, I knew that was my pattern to be avoidant, to run away from the problem, to not dive headfirst and do the work, to be really defensive and protect myself, right? And put up those walls. So I very often asked myself, especially after having that initial experience of feeling this lightness and release in my body when I visualized myself leaving, I didn't know if I was just being avoidant or if it was my intuition. I was like, is this my intuition telling me that this relationship is just not serving me anymore? Or am I genuinely just feeling safer running away from the problem? And I think that's one of the reasons why I stayed as long as I did, because I started with you en route to rise at like the end of May, beginning of June ish, right?
Yeah.
And I I mean, you saw I was doing work. I was having hard conversations with Nelson. We were doing deep, deep, deep somatic work, meditations, even activities. I remember on some of the group calls, you were like, I know Alex, and I know that she can go deep with herself. This activity is going to be really triggering for some of you, right? So we were doing the work, and I still doubted myself a little bit towards the end. I'm like, I I can't ethically justify leaving if I have this question in my mind. I need to know and I need to trust that it is wholeheartedly my intuition and not me leaving anything on the table. I wanted to put my whole self out there. I wanted to do everything that we possibly could before getting to that point of divorce, right? And I did finally reach that where there wasn't even a question in my mind of like, I saw myself showing up. I saw the progress in my own nervous system and my own ability to regulate around him and the quality of some of our conversations and my expression of my values. And that was how I knew at the end, I was like, this is it. This is it. And this is the right choice for me. And I'm not running away from anything anymore. I faced everything head on, even though it was scary, even though it was hard, even though it triggered the heck out of me, right? Because facing your fears is like the number one thing for an avoidant. Like, we don't want to do that, you know? And by the end, it was like this overwhelming sensation in my body. It was like I woke up. I could see the world clearer than I could have ever seen it before. Everything started to click. And it was just this full body chills. You're done. And from that point on, I started taking steps, hiring a lawyer and moving out.
So this is fantastic because you're saying you were struggling with, is this my avoidant attachment nervous system or is this intuition? Same thing can be said for someone like me who's more, is this my anxious attachment wanting me to stay or is it my intuition? And you cannot have that answer. You cannot find it. I believe when your nervous system is on fire, dysregulated, and survival. And so, what I hear you saying is it would have been easy to run, but you did the work to get to a regulated nervous system, a safe place where you were breathing deeply, where you were in the present moment, where you weren't in a flight response. You weren't running, but it was a knowing. It was a deep
Mhm.
knowing that it was time to walk away. So, how did you arrive at that? I know the listener is like, okay, I hear you did somatic work and like, but what was maybe the biggest aha moment? Or maybe it wasn't a big one, maybe it was like a series. Um, but tell us for the listener who's craving to be able to tell the difference between her ego or attachment, insecure attachment and intuition.
Good question. I do think that it's really hard to articulate because it was a series of small events over a long period of time. It was a series of little breakthroughs throughout my time in your course. And it definitely started with that first call. It started with awareness around what that trigger felt like in my body. And it started with awareness around how I was actively avoiding conversations with him. I even caught myself, and I ended up apologizing to him about this. I caught myself actively procrastinating my work. I work from home, I own my own business, right? I was procrastinating my work until he woke up because he worked night shift. So he would wake up around 2. I would not really do anything all morning until like 1 p.m. And then I would walk my dog and I would go to a coffee shop that was open until midnight. And I would work at the coffee shop all night just to avoid being around him. And I recognized, okay, this doesn't feel good, right? This feels like flight. This feels like my nervous system is hyper vigilant. I'm on edge. I'm pacing around my apartment. I'm tense. I'm breathing shallow. I don't like this. It was a constant, it kind of was that feeling of anxiety, right? Like this feeling of this, the world's going to end at any moment, right? And I remember at one point, after recognizing all of that and learning what that really felt like, I confronted him and I learned how to communicate. I actually just started communicating using some of the resources that you gave us, right? Some of the activities that you gave us, started communicating how it felt in my body in the current moment. And that actually allowed me to regulate enough to sit with the discomfort. Because I remember I would go to talk to him about something, he would say something that would upset me, for example. And instead of avoiding the issue, even though I was so triggered and so dysregulated, I took a couple deep breaths and I said, hey, this is what it's feeling like in my body right now. And I would describe the sensations. And just that alone, expressing that to him, allowed me to feel safer,
Yeah.
allowed me to feel more comfortable. And then we could have a more productive conversation about it. And that got easier and easier over time to the point where I learned how to slow down and regulate on my own and then come to him in a really logical, calm, regulated state. And he noticed the difference for sure. I was a lot more intellectual, is the word that's coming to mind, right? I could actually like be my fullest self because when you're super triggered, when you're in fight or flight, like your logic brain is not online. You're not making sense. Again, you're not your best self. So I could actually use the tools that I had learned from previous therapists, use the tools that I had learned from you to express how I was feeling in a way that was not defensive, not attacking him, and actually trying to give opportunity for solutions or pose ideas for solutions and try to come together and compromise on certain things. And he noticed it. He was like, wow, I really do see you doing the work. I see you showing up. I see you having more of an open mind about this. And he gave me a lot of praise. But you said it, I think, or you said it, Aaron said it, this work that we do for ourselves, really, because that's what it is. It's like learning how to trust yourself, learning how to regulate your own nervous system so that you can show up as that best version of you. One thing I will say really quickly is that meditation you had me do, where I got to speak to my higher self and I got to speak to my inner child and integrate those two women as part of who I am now. That was incredibly, incredibly powerful. And actually hearing what they would tell me, that in that meditation, actually, my higher self told me, actually, no, it was my higher self and my inner child. I think I remember that. My inner child said, get out, get out, get out, get out. And at the time, I thought she was referring to get outside,
Mhm.
play. And I think that was part of it because when we get outside, when we ground, we can have a more regulated nervous system. But that was powerful. And I'm getting full body chills even just talking about this. And then I remember talking with my higher self, and she said, you're going to be okay. And it was this full, deep relaxation, knowing that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. And I'm allowed to trust myself. But anyway, doing this work, even though he recognized it, it was very much a call him up or call him out situation. And I still have a lot of love for this man. I really learned a lot from our relationship. And I told him at the end, I want you to find your happiness. I don't think we're aligned anymore. And I really want you to have the life and the wife and the family that you want to have. And I care about him a lot. Like, I truly do wish him the best. But I think that I raised my frequency and he didn't join me on that journey, you know? And I think that played a big role in our separation too.
Tell us more about that. I remember towards the end, once you did have the clarity, you wanted to complete the grief. There was grief there. I mean, this is a big transition. This has been the most, important person in your life for almost a decade. And so I remember this beautiful call where there's just tears releasing and there was so much gratitude that you were communicating to him. And then I remember you updating us on how the conversation went when you let him know what decision you arrived at, and that there were tears there too. And I remember it sounded to me like it felt softer and more beautiful and full of more love than you would imagine a quote unquote divorce conversation sounding like. So for the
Yeah.
woman who's terrified about the potential possibility of that, I think their mind goes to worst case scenario, glasses being thrown, screaming, total discord, disconnection. Sometimes that's some cases, but it does not have to be that way. And yours was not that way. So can you give
Yeah.
us insight into that?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I attribute the success of that conversation to the regulation of my own nervous system and my ability to stay calm through that because I had seen him get angry. He was a wall puncher, a trash can breaker. Like he had those outbursts. And so I was thinking about that. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know if he's going to get aggressive. Is he going to hire his own lawyer? Is he going to fight back? Is he going to get angry? I had fear, but I trusted myself. I trusted my intuition, and I also knew him. I knew him, I don't want to say better than he knew himself, but I saw a lot of kindness and compassion in him that I don't know if he always recognized, right? And so when I sat down and had the conversation, I was like, hey, I love you. We have both given it everything we've got for the last 2.5 years. We have tried everything. We've grown a lot, we've learned a lot, but I don't think this is working anymore. I think we've both hit our red line and I think it's just time to call it. And he started crying. I started crying. We did get pretty dysregulated at one point. He was so upset, even though there were so many conversations prior to this one around me leaving and hey, we need to make this work or else I'm not going to stay. I tried to make it as clear as possible. I didn't want to give him an ultimatum by any means, but I wanted to be clear in how I was feeling about the relationship, that divorce was on the table, right? Even though that's not what I wanted ultimately, it was still on the table. And he was begging for me to stay. And at one point, I got really heated. I started yelling. And at that point, I was like, all right, we need to pause. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to regulate. I'm going to breathe. And then I came back and I was like, look, I am not going to throw you under the bus here. We've both said some shit. Like we both treated each other poorly. But at the end of the day, we are growing in two different directions and I want the best for you. I want the best for me. I want us to find happiness. And I just don't think that we can do that together at this point. And at that point in the conversation, he conceded. He said, "You know what? You're right. Like I knew that it was bad. I'll be honest, I didn't think that you would leave. I recognized that I wasn't showing up for you in the way that I should have. I wasn't taking this seriously, and I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to start doing the work, and we're going to handle this like adults." And I packed my bag. I took my dog. I moved in with my friend who lived an hour away in Maryland. And I even told him, I was like, I'm going to have to come back. We can have another conversation to get some closure and talk logistics because I essentially separated from him for a week. And then I had to drive back down to Virginia to get the rest of my stuff and have another conversation. And even at that point, he didn't fight me. He didn't fight me on anything. I mean, granted, I will say I'm proud of myself because prior to that conversation, I hired a lawyer, I drafted the separation agreement, I was in charge of our finances, so I knew exactly what I wanted and what we needed to do. And we split everything down the middle. It was super amicable and there was no tension at all. Truly, it was best case scenario.
Yeah,
And
thank you for
yeah,
sharing that.
yeah,
Also for sharing the real parts, right? It's like it's not real if you were to have painted some picture of I learned all of this nervous system tools and then it was like we were hugging and crying and I think that's goals. That'd be awesome if that's how a separation would happen for some people, but you're also human. So you getting activated is not a sign that you failed or, you have a nervous system, right? So of course tensions are going to get high, but I love what you did with it. We are not our initial reaction. We are how we handle our initial reaction. And what you did when you started realizing, okay, this is getting heated, back to old patterns. I'm not showing up how I want to be. My values, you took a beat, took a
yeah.
pause, collected yourself, came back. And so now I know you're in Colorado. It was an insane move. We don't have time to get into all of the details, but tell us what happened and how he responded to this tragic horror that happened when you moved. He was supportive, checking in on you. Tell the listeners, crazy.
Yeah. So for context, I separated from my now ex-husband in November. My lawyer didn't mess around. We had our divorce decree signed by December. So I had lived with my friend in Maryland for 2 months. And then I knew in my heart and soul that Denver, Colorado was my home. I knew that I was meant to be out here. I knew that I got what I needed in DC. I gave it everything I had. And so I started my drive back to Colorado on January 1st, 2025. Moved in, my new apartment, my new space, nothing. I kept nothing from my relationship with Nelson. I started over completely. It was really just me, my new car, and my dog and my clothes moving across the country. I move in, I get my apartment set up. Within a week, I get hit by a car. And that's a whole other episode for another day. But I was legitimately hit by a car while walking my dog in a crosswalk. This guy ran right through me, and I was rushed to the ICU. I had a skull fracture, epidural hematoma, and a traumatic brain injury. And it was truly divine intervention. The fact that my dog is okay, and that based on the video footage, it really is a miracle that I'm alive.
Yeah,
And
I saw
y-
it. I remember being like, part of me wants to see it, part of me's terrified, and you sent it over, and I felt literally nauseous. And you were like,
yeah,
I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have sent it. I was like, no, I'm okay. I'm regulating, but this is a miracle. You went
yeah.
flying, Alex.
Flying across the intersection. Yeah. Yeah. Whew. Crazy. I know. It is an absolutely insane story. And I'll be honest, I don't know if it was him just not knowing how to regulate during a crisis like that, because essentially what happened, how he found out, because we were no contact. We got all the logistics taken care of and we hadn't really texted about anything other than like taxes. We were very civil. It was very, like, again, very, very amicable. There were no issues. But then by the time I was moving out to Colorado, I hadn't heard from him in, over 3 weeks. And so I was on the phone with one of my friends when this happened. And this was a long distance friend. This wasn't a Denver friend. So I was on the phone with her. She heard somebody start screaming, call 911. She ended up calling my other friend who knew Nelson. This was actually the friend that I mentioned earlier in the podcast who got pregnant. She called her, and then that friend called my ex-husband because they had each other's number. They knew each other in college. That's how ended up meeting him. And she was like, "Hey, we don't know what's going on. We think Alex is hurt. We think she got hit by a car. We need the phone number of one of her Denver friends. We need to get a hold of somebody to like help her, right?" So that's how he found out. And within 15 minutes, I didn't end up seeing this text until later in the hospital. He reached out to me and he was like, "Hey, everybody seems to be freaking out about you. Can you please let somebody know that you're okay?" And in that moment, I was like, no offense, but what an asshole. I was really upset. I was like, I I'm your ex-wife. We had 6 years of love together. Like, what the heck? You're concerned about everybody else like messaging you and you're not concerned about me. I like it threw me for a loop. But again, I credit we were in crisis. He
Yep.
hadn't learned how to dysregulate or how to regulate his dysregulated nervous system. I'm sure he was in shock. I'm sure he didn't know what to do. And he didn't know what was going on. He wasn't there. He wasn't, getting updates or play-by-plays from anybody, right? So we actually did end up talking not too long ago about all of it. And I told him everything that happened. And he was like, "I'm so glad that you're okay. I'm so glad that you and Emmy are okay. Do you need anything? I'm here. Happy that you're alive. It's all good." And it was actually really nice. I'll share this like little funny thing. Back when we were married, whenever we had to send each other emails for one thing or another, again, usually it was like finance stuff, paperwork, formality stuff, he would always sign the emails. Like he would be like, "Dear wife, signed your loving husband." And it was always this cute little thing that he did. And we would just like have funny email signatures to one another. And so he had to send me some tax stuff and some medical records just so I could submit it to insurance after the accident. And he addressed the email, "Dear ex-wife, signed your loving ex-husband."
Oh,
And I was like, I knew just because I knew him. I was like, that's him extending the olive branch.
yeah.
That's him trying to like make peace, trying to be friends. And so I took that. I started asking, he had got a dog after I left. And so I was like, "Hey, how's Revan? How's she doing? How are you doing? How's the new job?" So that was really nice after this insanely traumatic accident and a not so awesome response from him initially. It was nice to kind of come back together and sort of establish what is like maybe the very, very, very new beginnings of what could be a friendship one day, or at the very least, I can look back and say, we're okay.
Again, you are not your knee-jerk reaction. You're your second response, the intentional, conscious response, both of you. It's really
Hmm.
awesome.
Yeah.
Serious kudos and admiration. And last question I want to ask as we land this plane, and then I'm going to give you some rapid fire fun questions.
Heck yeah.
For the woman who her mind just does go to worst case scenario, can't imagine life without her partner currently, and just pictures it doom, gloom, chaos, terror. I know you have done your fair share of grieving and crying, but can you also illuminate how life feels positively now on the other side of deciding that for you, separation was the best next intuitive step?
Yeah. And one thing I'll say about that is you can't control another person's response. You know, everything that I'm about to say, I do believe would be wholeheartedly true, even if he had a negative reaction to the separation divorce conversation. Because currently, and even I felt this way within 3 days of moving in with my friend in Maryland, I feel that lightness and that joy every single day. Within a week, my creativity came back. I am a super artsy person. I used to journal and write poetry and paint and draw, do photography. And I remember when I was in it with him, when I was so dysregulated, I didn't have any energy or capacity for that whatsoever. I didn't have a creative bone in my body. I wasn't even excited to decorate our apartment because it just didn't feel like home. Within a week, I started writing poetry again, and it was just pouring out of me. And now moving back here, starting my new life, single, Denver, Colorado, like one bedroom apartment of my dreams. I have a mountain view. Like even after quite literally almost dying and having this incredibly traumatic experience in the hospital, I don't want to go to sleep because my life is so good, Becky. Like I feel so happy, so free, so aligned with my most authentic self. I am truly, wholeheartedly living the life that I've always wanted to live. I feel so positive. Even in the hospital, I was smiling, I was laughing, I was making jokes with my nurses. I just had this overwhelming sense of I'm going to be okay. I'm going to survive this. And quite literally, some women, I know you were one of them, felt like if I leave my partner, I'm going to die, right?
Mhm.
I'm not going to survive. And again, coming from somebody who didn't ultimately want divorce, knew that it was the best decision for her by the end of it, but didn't want that, didn't want, I mean, again, I'm my own business owner. I absolutely had my fair share of fear coming up of like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be single. I don't have a safety net. I have to provide for myself. What the heck am I going to do? Again, it was this overwhelming sense of I trust myself enough to know that I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to regret not betting on myself. Right. And then, especially after quite literally a near death experience, I just knew that I was going to be okay. And that's, I think, what somatic work can do for you, right? It cultivates this deep sense of self trust like never before. So, even multiple, like not just divorce, but like the literal worst case scenario happened to me. And I still, even in the ICU, knew that I was going to be okay.
Insane. Absolutely insane. Alex, thank you for sharing your story. Is there any last words of wisdom for the listener who's wondering, should I stay? Should I go? And really grappling with that question. What's your best piece of advice for her?
Well, I think, I don't know if this is my best piece of advice, but one piece of advice that I can offer is even though it feels like death, even though it feels so scary, I I am living proof that divorce can be celebrated, you know? And I think there is a lot of stigma around it. There's a lot of stigma around people who leave because even though behind closed doors, our relationship was not healthy for either of us, right? But from the outside looking in, our relationship was very normal. It was very safe. You know, standard, okay, they get married, he's in the military, they're going to have kids. Like, she has her life, he has his, they do stuff together. Not a lot of people knew what was actually going on, but on paper, it looked like a good relationship. But I was still feeling incredibly unfulfilled. And I think that there's a lot of stigma around leaving a relationship that on paper seems safe. You've checked all the boxes, you are reconnecting, you're going on dates. It's not great, but maybe it's good, maybe it's better. But I was somebody who wanted an extraordinary life for myself. I wanted an extraordinary partner. I wanted somebody to match my energy. And leaving even without all of the toxicity and all of the fighting, even leaving something like that, I think is looked down upon. And a lot of women fear that they wouldn't be able to pick themselves back up, that they wouldn't be able to provide for themselves or get out of a, bad situation. And I am just here to tell you that you can and that it's okay if you choose to leave. Because again, I don't know a single woman who wouldn't want to save their marriage, right? Like you think you're going to be together with this person for the rest of your life. Of course it's hard. Of course there's a lot of grief. But you even said it yourself at one point. You're like, you're the happiest divorced person that I know. And I am. It was the best decision that I could have ever made for myself. Accident included, 2025 has been the best year of my life. And I cannot look back on a single weekend so far of this year and say a single bad thing about it. Like, I am having so much fun. And I just want that woman to know that this is possible.
Alex, so happy for you. So beautiful, so empowering. It really just dissolves the fear of these imagined scenarios and nightmares that go through our head, anticipatory anxiety. And then when you're in it, you're like, oh my God, this is a safe landing. And what I hear more than anything is, I trust me. You have
Yeah.
built so much internal self-trust. You know your intuition like the back of your hand now, and it's not cloudy anymore. Now you're getting to use this superpower for other fun areas of life, like business. And, I know life journey and path is potentially leading to new exciting places. So,
Yeah.
I could talk to you forever. We're going to end with a rapid fire game, my friend. Are you ready for these questions?
I'm so ready. Let's do it.
All right. Question one, number one book recommendation, either for fun or life changing.
Ooh. So I'm a big fantasy romance reader. I love the ACOTAR series. Anything by Sarah J. Maas. I'm super into Fourth Wing right now, and that series Onyx Storm just came out. Those books quite literally were life-changing for me. So if you want a little bit of an escape from reality, Fourth Wing or the ACOTAR series.
I love it. So good. Okay. Question number two, what is your guilty pleasure?
Somebody asked me this on a first date recently, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I feel guilt about having pleasure. And I'm like, that's such an Alex response.
So, Alex.
I'm like, I love having a fun time, so I don't feel guilt about it. I
Oh,
don't, he was expecting me to say something like a hot fudge sundae. I'm like, I don't feel guilty about eating food, all right? So that's gonna be my answer. I don't feel guilty about having pleasure.
so good. That's very on brand for you. Okay. Question three, what is the meaning of life?
To live. It's just to live. I've been thinking about this so much, especially after my accident. And I genuinely believe that we are here to learn and grow and experience this human experience as a soul. And I think that if we all just took a step back and allowed ourselves to pursue the things that make us happy, the things that light our soul on fire, I think that's the point. I really think the point is just to live and experience and grow from whatever comes our way.
Alex is beautiful. So well said. And the last question, my friend, what's the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
Mm. The phrase that's coming to my mind right now, and I think that this is particularly relevant in this phase of life that I'm in, but I think could have been relevant to really all of the different evolutions that I've been through. Take the relief. That's been my catchphrase so far in 2025. Take the relief. Allow yourself to be cared for. Allow life to be easy, right? I mean, I myself, I've lived most of my life in a lot of hardship, a lot of childhood trauma, a lot of years just trying to go, 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 be the best, be the best, be the high achiever, be this version of me that I'm not. And I had to overcome a lot of challenges, right? I think in the first podcast that we did together, I talked about my eating disorder. And I think there's this misconception in life that it has to be hard, that we have to struggle in order to earn our worth. And we don't. And I think that I'm embodying that every single day too. Even with, $100,000 in medical bills and having to take a month and a half off of work and having multiple low income months as a result of that, and learning how to provide for myself for the first time in my own apartment in my new city, making new friends post divorce, I am happier than I've ever been and I'm not stressed. I feel like me living in alignment with my truest self, the universe has been rewarding me like crazy. Everything is just happening for me. People are taking care of me in ways that I've never allowed before. And prior to doing this work, I felt like I didn't deserve that I didn't deserve an easy, abundant life. But now I realize that I do. And I think that would be my best piece of advice to anybody out there listening right now is just take the relief.
Take the relief. So good. And feel no guilt and pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on. I love you. I know we'll chat soon, but thank you for sharing so vulnerably. I would have expected nothing less. Really powerful. And I know this is going to help so many people. All right,
Thank
girl.
you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. This was awesome.
It was. We'll talk soon. Bye,
Sounds
friend.
good.